Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to DEC Online. I'm joined here this morning by my old friend and lecturer, Dr. Patrick Mitchell, who's going to be preaching to us today. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Dougie.
And also my sometime golf partner.
Sometimes
Golf partner as well. Yeah, Patrick's a great golfer, by the way. I'm not. But you're very welcome.
Thank you.
It's lovely to see you again. You've been with us here a few
Pleasure to be
times.
here.
Yeah, good. So, as you know, we've been going through our series on 1 Corinthians, which is about spiritual maturity. That's certainly the prism through which we've been looking at the series. And when we came to the section of 1 Corinthians 13, which is the very famous talk that Paul seems to just slot into the middle of the letter about love, I immediately thought of you because, of course, Patrick has written a book, The Message of Love. So first of all, what sort of a year has it been for you? It's been strange, hasn't it?
Oh, I teach in IBI, so it's been a strange year for us. Yeah, we were in classes, I think, last time physically in classes. Well, we were in March, we got back for 2 weeks in September, and then level 3 came in and we weren't back in class again. So we've been teaching online all year, so that's been a interesting experience. In many ways it's gone better than I thought it would,
Really?
But it's also, I think everybody's weary of online and on Zoom.
Yeah, because I remember when I was in college there, obviously a lot of the stuff that went on at coffee time, the conversations with people and the forming of relationships and so on.
Yeah, students sometimes say they learn more outside the classroom than inside. I'm not sure what to make of that remark.
Well, I was at your lectures and I'd say that's true. I know, I'm joking. Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of, I think a lot of the time the discussion can take place a bit more outside, where, you get people expressing different views. And
learning happens in community. You learn in relationship with others. You learn in relationship with a teacher, but there's so much learning. I mean, we have a group of adult learners with lots of experience in their own lives together, so you learn from one another. So, I mean, Zoom has enabled that to happen. It's worked really quite well, and students have engaged really well in breakout rooms. And you have to think as a teacher how to design your teaching and get people engaged. So we've all learnt a lot, and I think it's gone well, but we're all looking very much to getting back in class next year.
Absolutely, yeah. But the same in church, I think, for us, we're so thankful for Zoom, we're so thankful for, doing Bible studies and prayer meetings and connect groups and all that online, which are fine, but there is something about physical presence which we miss terribly.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're doing church and you can't sing. I find that horrendous.
Yes. Yeah, I went to a church service physically for the first time this last Sunday, and we were singing behind masks, and it was just still strange to be singing behind masks. Yeah.
Well, I think the guidelines are you're not supposed to be singing at all. But don't tell them where you were, Patrick. Don't tell them where you were.
They don't know what's going on behind the mask.
So anyway, so you wrote this book then.
I did.
When? About 2 years ago?
2 years ago, published 2019.
Yeah, it's great, by the way. And I've quoted from it, actually, on quite a few talks.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I hope you're not looking for royalties now. But so what got you to write the book then? About love?
Well,
anyway.
Good question. I think it was really through teaching and preaching, and especially doing a study on Paul that I had to write something on. And it was just struck me as I was doing. Now, we knew these things. It's there, and we know Corinthians 13 is there, but just the pervasive theology of love through the New Testament, particularly Paul, but John, of course, Jesus, of course. The whole law is summed up: love God, love your neighbour, back to the Old Testament. And it just struck me how such a major biblical theme was there, but the other side of it was also, I was thinking, I haven't really heard much teaching and preaching on love. I haven't read much stuff on love, and it's a strange thing where we all know love is important. We sing worship songs about the love of God, but we often don't think theologically and think it through, and just how important it is within the Bible. So that's what drew me into studying it. And then the more I did that, the more interested and excited I got. I really enjoyed studying it. Yeah.
Because it is kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, it's the central teaching of Jesus, and yet you're right. There's not a whole lot of talking about love or whatever. Or maybe, do you think that is in some ways a kind of counter to the world, to the world where it talks about, sloppy romantic love all the time, and that we've kind of shied away from it a bit?
Yes. Love is probably one of the most, I don't know, is it elastic words, or it could mean anything to anyone, and it's probably one of the most used words and maybe then devalued words. So yeah, what do you mean when you say love? Yeah, absolutely. I think, therefore, it's become a sort of catch-all word. So I think you're right, we sort of shy away from it. But actually, as you look at it, what the Bible has to say about love is so deep and profound, and it speaks of a very different, Christian love is very distinct and different to the popular understandings of love in contemporary world. So that's the sort of dynamic that goes through the book. We sort of engage the two together.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm really looking forward to hearing now what you have to say in a few minutes' time. So we're just going to go to a worship song now, which is What a Beautiful Name.
You were the Word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is, what a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. You didn't want heaven without us, so Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin was great, your love was greater. What could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King.
So we're back to our final edition of Mind Matters with Ross today. So I'm a bit kind of sad that this is your last one.
It's not like you're not going to see me again, though.
No, I know that, but it's still a bit sad.
Yeah.
So what are you going to talk about today, Ross?
Something a little bit different.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I actually have my notes with me because I didn't finish writing it until quite late last night, but that may have been because Liverpool were on.
Yes.
And I got a little bit sidetracked.
And you were delighted with the result.
Yeah.
3-0 sets it up very nicely now for Sunday night.
Yes, but in true Liverpool fashion, I'm still, in mode that we're going to throw it away.
Okay, have you done a kind of a psychological assessment of yourself as to why you're so pessimistic?
It's called trauma of being a Liverpool supporter for over 30 years.
PTSD from being a Liverpool supporter.
Yeah, something along those lines. So like I said to Dougie, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different today. It's not something that you would necessarily spot quite quickly or recognize in a person. It's not something that you would be able to recognize by a set of symptoms. It isn't even something that would be in the DSM-5. And it's not something that drug or pharmaceutical companies have devised some sort of medication in order to combat it. It doesn't discriminate against young or old, and it doesn't discriminate against male or female either. There isn't a quick 5-point acronym that I can give us this week which may help us with what I am going to speak about. That being said, the people and persons who have experienced what I'm going to talk about will know the pang and the sting of what I'm going to talk about all too well. It's something that I think probably you will have felt yourself, and it's something as well that I have felt hugely in my life too. And I would say more often than not, at some point throughout the course of therapy, this will come out in the room in some way, shape or form. What I want to talk about this morning is shame. Because it's not a medical or a mental disorder, the definition of shame has been something that has been quite difficult to come about and to come up with over time. However, there is a quite well-known author and researcher called Brené Brown from America who has spent much of her academic life dedicated to researching this whole area of shame. And she has come up with quite a brilliant definition for shame. And she says this: it's the intensely painful feeling or experience that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of acceptance, connection, or belonging. And you will notice as that definition has been read out that there are some pretty strong words connected with a sense of shame. Flawed, unworthy, outside of connection or belonging. Shame is a deep human emotion that we all feel, and it's a difficult thing to experience. And the narrative that it tells us is that we're not good enough or that we're dirty. One of the things that research shows us is that shame drives people into places of despair. Studies have shown that shame is very closely associated with things like depression, substance abuse, eating disorders, anxiety, and the list goes on and on. And what's really evident from research as well, and indeed from my experience within the counselling room, is that what triggers off shame can be a whole different myriad of things. Things like bullying, appearance, parenting issues, social issues, class issues, abuse, also things like money issues, childhood memories are all different things that can really trigger off this deep emotional feeling of shame that we have. And whenever it kicks in, shame drives us into a place of isolation, rage, emptiness, and sometimes hopelessness and despair. One of the things that I have become very aware of as I've journeyed in the profession that I'm moving into is that shame grows in a particular place, and it grows very quickly. And that place is in silence and is in darkness as well. But actually, it can become unraveled in light and in connection too. One of the privileges that I have with the work that I do is to be able to sit beside people who are perhaps telling their stories for the first time. They're telling the things that have made them feel this way. And as they start to speak it out, you can see the unraveling of shame that starts to happen with the connection that they have. And quite often they will say after a period of time, is that I never thought that this feeling of shame that I've always felt could be changed and could be different. And that is another lie that shame can speak to us. It can tell us that the way we feel can never change, and we feel that we are stuck in this way. Brené Brown uses this really brilliant phrase and expression. She talks about this, how shame is this emotional thing that we can't really avoid feeling. So she says that if we are to be people who are going to feel and experience shame in our lives, then one thing that we need to try and build up is something called shame resilience. She talks about 3 things in particular which help towards building resilience to shame. That's courage, it's connection, and it's compassion. She says that quite often whenever people feel and experience shame, shame beats them up. And often to be able to take a step of courage can be difficult. But actually, if we can cultivate courage and stepping out to try and combat against these feelings, that is one of the most important things that we can do. The other thing that's really important for us is to have connection, because shame very often isolates us. And when we isolate us, it only exacerbates those feelings of despair, of worthlessness even more. And so to find important places where we can connect over the things, and safe places that we can connect over the things that we feel shame over, is a really important part of building shame resilience. The other thing is compassion, self-compassion, because of course whenever shame kicks in, quite often the person who becomes, who we beat up ourselves is, or we beat ourselves up particularly when we feel shame. So to be able to exercise self-compassion is really, really important when it comes to building up a resilience towards shame. What I would say to you is that shame is a huge thing, and within 5 minutes I'm not going to be able to blow it all out of the water here. But if it's something that you think that has, gosh, that's really sort of struck a chord with me, I'd really encourage you to maybe read some of the work in and around what Brené Brown has done. Particularly her book called The Gifts of Imperfection, but she has other books as well. And so what I'd also encourage you to do, if something has come up for you today as well that we've done throughout this whole series, is that if something is particularly difficult, and shame is something that has perhaps been in your life, and in the negative sense, of course, is don't be afraid to reach out to someone who can give you the help that you may need. So I hope that is of some help to you today.
Thank you. That's been really helpful, yeah. I mean, shame is such a big issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
And just as you were talking, I was thinking about how, you know, when Jesus met people who were shamed in their own society, who were excluded, he didn't ever add to their shame.
No.
You know, he went to them as they were, and took them as they were.
Yeah.
And I think we sometimes find that easy for everybody else and not so easy for ourselves.
I've sat with a number of people whose shame has been massive in their life for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And quite often when they come and they talk and they say what it is that has contributed to this, they'll come back the next week or the week after that and they'll say, I can't believe how you have approached me hasn't changed. Because whenever we feel that sense of shame, we think everyone will start to treat us the way that we've maybe treated ourselves and the way that we felt. And of course, as you kind of say, Jesus never ever did that. He never treated people or shamed them. You know, you think about the woman at the well, classic example. It was never something that Jesus increased in their lives.
Yeah. So the church should be.
Exactly, yeah, 100%.
So listen, thanks very much for taking this series over the last couple of months. And a lot of people have, you know, written in to tell us how important they found it, how helpful and so on. So
yeah, good.
I really appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, no problem. It's, I've enjoyed doing it. It's been a bit different.
Good.
But yeah, thanks for letting me do it.
Thanks. Cool. And now we're on to the kids slot with Kezia.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Kids Slot. Hope you're all doing well. We are nearly there, nearly at the end of term and nearly at our summer holidays. So exciting. And I just want to welcome you back to our new series that we're doing. So we were looking at the book of Ephesians and looking at this letter that Paul had written, but now we are looking at 1 Peter. And on Right Now Media, Phil has been talking about a few different episodes and about this chapter. And so this week, I had to write it down because it's a bit of a long verse, but this week we are looking at 1 Peter chapter 1 verses 1 and then also verses 13 to 21. And the little passage that I want to concentrate on and to help you maybe understand it a little bit is this. In the past, you did not understand, so you did the evil things you wanted. But now you are children of God who obey. So do not live as you live in the past. Now, when I was reading that and when I was writing it down on that piece of paper, I was trying to think of a way to maybe explain it to you a little bit better for you guys to understand it. And the example that I came up with was an example that we've all been through. So we have all gone through school. We have all had our first day of junior infants. We have had our first day maybe in second class, first day back in fourth class. And every single day, first day that we go back, we are always learning something new. So maybe when we started in junior infants, we were about 4 or 5 years old. And a lot of us, I know for me, when I started, I couldn't read. And so I had to learn how to read. I had to learn all my different sounds. I had to learn all my different numbers. I also had to learn how to sit down because when I was little, I never sat down still. I'd always want to run around. And my teacher said, oh, Kezia, you need to sit down because we're doing our learning. And so in this verse, it talks about how we used to do these things in the past. But now that we know God and that we are a child of God, we know not to do those things anymore. So when we started in junior infants, we know we had to learn. Maybe on the first day and the second day, we were a little bit unsure of what to do. But by the end of the week, we knew that we had to sit down and we were learning our sounds. And as we went on, we were able to read maybe small words like cat and box. And then maybe when we go into fourth class, we knew how to do multiplication. But we learned all these things. And so then when we get older, we know what to do and know how to do it. And so in this case, we know we have learned from maybe God's word, from the Bible, from just praying to him and listening to his voice, that we have learned not to do evil things. We've learned not to sin, to lie, and to maybe not talk nice about other people. And we've also learned to respect God. We have to respect him by listening to him and obeying him. So I hope that has outlined that verse a little bit more for you. But if you tune in to Right Now Media, Phil and all his friends are there and he's going to talk more about that verse in a little bit more depth. But I hope that you'll keep that analogy of your first day in school and how far you've come from junior infants to whatever class you're in, and how you know all the different rules in school. You know, maybe sometimes you have to put your hand up, you can't shout out a turn, you need to ask to leave the room, and you know all those things, but beforehand you didn't. So I hope that helps, and I hope you have a lovely Sunday, and I will see you again soon. Bye.
Well, good morning. We turn today to 1 Corinthians 13, which is probably one of the most famous passages in the whole of the Bible. It's read at funerals, it's read at weddings. Everybody probably in Ireland knows a little bit of 1 Corinthians 13. And it's maybe our very familiarity with the passage means that we think we know what it's all about. But my experience has been, when it came to study this passage, it really struck me how deep and profound and actually personally challenging it is. And so I call this passage like a searing searchlight, where Paul is casting a searchlight onto the lives of the Corinthian church. I understand you've been going through Corinthians. You're all familiar with the context and the story of the letter. So here we are in Corinthians 13, and Paul turns to love. But we're going to consider, well, why does Paul do that? And what's he really saying? And what's he saying to us today as we read this passage on love? So let me read the text together, and we'll read it together. And if you have a Bible, when we're going through the passage, it'll be easier to follow where we're going. I'm reading from the last verse of chapter 12. And now I will show you the most excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. This is God's word to us. Well, this passage is often, as I mentioned, read at funerals and weddings. We're familiar with it. And it's almost like it's read like a poem to love itself. Love is patient, love is kind. Love is really what life is all about. And some philosophers and psychologists have talked about this passage and talked about love as if love really gives us the sense of ultimate meaning and purpose in life. Love itself is what life is all about. Let me read a quote from a couple of people here. Love is glorified today largely because it represents a sort of refuge in our chilly environment of an affluent, impersonal, uncertain society. And this was written before COVID and pandemics. Our life is weighed down by all kinds of risk, weighted by expectations and frustrations, and love is the new center around which our detraditionalized lives revolve. Isn't that an interesting quote? And it's almost saying, where it used, as John says in his gospel, God is love, it's almost like today it has become that love is God. Love itself is what gives us meaning and significance and hope. Beyond death, we exalt somebody's love at a funeral, and love itself is almost detached from the story of the Bible and of God, and love itself has become something we worship and follow and seek significance in. One philosopher's called this the divinization of love. Love itself almost becomes an idol which we worship. And it's very interesting in that sort of scenario, God disappears. And isn't it interesting, as you read Corinthians 13, you can see why this passage sometimes is read that way, because God doesn't appear at all in Corinthians 13. So Paul is reading, where we need to read Paul in a different way here. He's not just talking about love in the abstract. He's talking about love in the story of Corinth and to these Corinthians Christians. And he's speaking right into their lives and their community. And as we've seen, they need to hear these words. So this is a but coming, and some buts are bigger than other buts. And this is quite a big but in Corinthians. We need to read this text in the sense of the context of Corinthians. So let's look at what we're doing here. He's speaking into a community, as Dougie will have unpacked, riven by division and sexual immorality, of misplaced pride, of thinking they've arrived. They're very proud of their knowledge and their wisdom and their charismatic gifts and all of this stuff. And Paul has got this passage right at the heart of this letter because this is what they need to hear. And let me say, this is what Christians today need to hear, because this is right at the heartbeat of the whole Christian life, of the whole life of the Christian community and the church. And so as we think of Corinthians 13, we're thinking really, I think, ultimately of the mission and identity of the church. And we are called to be a community of love. And Paul is saying if we don't get this right, we've missed the entire point. I remember my wife told me this story. Some years ago, she was in college and there was a surprise party planned for her birthday when we were away we were in college together. And her friend was supposed to sort of chaperone her and get her to the right place at the right time without her knowing. And her friend missed her. And my wife went off, and she went off to visit a friend, and she was gone all day. It wasn't planned. And you had 20 or 30 people or whatever it was back at the flat waiting for her to come, and she never came. And they were there for hours, and eventually she turned up at about 10 o'clock at night, and they were all sort of irritated and angry. Where were you? Why were you not here? And sort of the whole point of the surprise party was sort of lost. They'd missed the point of the party, which was to bless her, and it was almost in a way, well, where were you? It's your fault you weren't here. And so what we're looking at here is, if we don't get love at the center of the Christian life, we've missed the point. We've actually started to lose the whole purpose of what we're called to be as Christians. And this is what Paul is saying. If we look at those first 3 verses, they're really quite remarkable. Look at the examples. He's saying, without love, I'm a meaningless noise. And I don't know what, if you can think of music you really don't like and turn it up to full volume and just blare it out, it's like this pulsating noise that's irritating. It's just like meaningless, loud noise that makes no sense. And you're just making noise in the background. If I speak in the tongues of angels, and the Corinthians were fascinated with speech and gifts and of tongues. And Paul is saying, even if you're gifted with this charismata, the speaking in tongues, and even of men or of angels, maybe prophecies from angels, speaking in the words of men, of wisdom, even if I have all of this brilliant language and insight, without love, it's all just noise. Then he says also, I'm a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. And it's just echo chamber stuff. Somebody has said this, and I think it's really good. Without love, we could just paraphrase Macbeth. Without love, it's just life is full of fury and sound, and it signifies nothing. Now, I think in our world of social media and much speech, maybe you're a tremendous communicator. It doesn't matter how many people hang on your every word. Maybe you're a good writer. It doesn't matter how many compliments we have around how many people follow us on our blogs or on Twitter or on Facebook, how popular we are in that world. I think Paul would be saying, without love, it's all just meaningless noise. It's just babble. So this searchlight really speaks into the heart of what we're doing and who we are. Then he says, without love, I'm nothing, verse 2. And you see the way he personalizes this. He's saying, I am nothing. He's including himself here. Here's this great preacher and missionary who God is working through powerfully, and says, without love, personally, he says, I am nothing. I am nothing at all. I am negated. So it's whether, he says, even if I have knowledge, which the Corinthians were fascinated by, gnosis, the Greek word gnosis, if I have faith that can move mountains, which sort of echoes back to Jesus' teaching, if you have faith, move mountains. So even if you have this insight of knowledge, even if you have great faith that even Jesus commends, so even if God is working through you in the most remarkable ways possible to imagine, without love, Paul says, I am nothing. It's an extraordinary thing. Somebody said, spiritual gifts minus love equals 0. So whatever gifts we have, if love is absent, they're really meaningless and worthless. And then verse 3, without love, I gain nothing. And he talks here about extreme self-denial. So he's talked about speech, he's talked about gifts, and now he's talking about even if I give my body over to the flames, if I give all I possess to the poor. So he's talking about incredible generosity, financially, and even self-sacrifice. You can't give anything more than your own body. And Paul is saying, even if I do these things, the most extraordinary self-sacrifice possible to imagine, without love, I gain nothing. And you're even echoing here the self-giving of our Lord, Jesus Christ, who gives himself to die on a cross. And here Paul's saying, even if I give myself as a martyr for the faith, without love, I gain nothing. That's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? Maybe as we think of the money side of things, if I give all I possess to the poor, I don't think I've ever met anybody who's given all they possess to the poor. I think studies would show that evangelical Christians are probably the most committed givers in the Christian world. Maybe some give more than 10%. I think the average is probably lower than that. But if you imagine the most extraordinary generosity, if somebody gives away everything they have, that would be probably something which would be absolutely remarkable to every one of us to see somebody do that. And yet Paul is saying even that extraordinary generosity without love gains nothing. So you see very quickly as you get into this text, this is not just a nice poem to love. It isn't just a sentimental sort of exaltation of how nice love is it? It's really getting to the heart of how important love is. And if love is absent, then everything is negated. Everything we do as a church, everything that church is about, whatever worship we do, speech, whatever ministries, all the things that we're doing, if love is absent, Paul would be saying, well, you've missed the point. It's all for nothing. So that's just the first 3 verses, and it gets pretty stretching as we go on. So let's look at from verses 4 to 7, and he speaks here of this, I like to think of it as 2 different pathways in the Christian life within these verses, and they're opposite pathways, and they're very challenging as we read them. A couple of years ago in IBI, we had a psychotherapist came and was speaking to the students and helping the staff too. But she was addressing issues of conflict, and it was really, really helpful. And what she said really struck me, and it stayed with me. And I asked her for the diagram that she used. And if you're reading the book, it's in the book. I got permission to put it in the book on the chapter in Corinthians. And she talks about 2 different pathways to when bad things happen to us. So somebody hurts you, somebody does something very hurtful, maybe something deeply damaging, something that really strikes you very deeply. So a wrong is done by somebody else to me or to you. And the normal response to that is anger. And this shouldn't happen. There's a sense of injustice. There's a pain and a hurt. But then she talked about as we go on, as we process this hurt and this anger, there's a choice to be made eventually as to which pathway are we going to go down in responding to what has been done to us. And she talked about one pathway, which is to hold on to the hurt, to dwell on it, to hold it deeply. And then resentment starts to build. And over time that can turn into bitterness. And then over time that turns into revenge. I'm going to get my own back on that person. And then even that can go further to a deep, passionate hatred, which can lead even to physical violence. And whether you end up in prison or not, there's an imprisoning of the soul and the spirit. You end up imprisoned by what that person has done to you. It's consumed you. And then there can be another pathway, which she talked about as a Christian response to deep injustice and hurt. And this is not at all negating the hurt that's been done. But that other pathway is a choice to move towards forgiveness. It's to move towards letting go of the hurt that's been done to you, to not let what that other person did to you consume you and control you, but actually to let it go. And that part of that is to acknowledge the hurt. It's not to diminish it. It's to talk about it. But that's movement towards forgiveness, which actually might take years, that you eventually get to a point where you can forgive the person and even love the person. And that leads to not imprisonment, not to hatred, not to bitterness, but to freedom and to be set free from what that person has done for you. It doesn't control you, you're set free from it. And I find that a very helpful sort of pathway of 2 choices to be made. And the reason I mention it here, I think this is exactly what Paul is doing in this text. Really, between verses 4 to 7, he's talking about 2 pathways. And one is the way of love, and one is the way of unlove, if there's such a thing, if we can make up that word. And there's a description of 7 positives about what love is, and there are 8 negatives about what love is not. So we've only got 15 more points to go in this sermon. So no, I'll go through these relatively quickly, because there's a lot here, but I do want to mention and unpack briefly what he's saying in these verses. So let's look at the positives first, the way of love. Love is patient, love is kind. And he's describing love here as an action. It's something we do. I think maybe in modern contemporary culture, love is often just a feeling. It's something we feel intensely. Now, love is a feeling, but love here for Paul is very much rooted in action of what we do in our lives. Love is it shows patience, it shows kindness. And patience is like being long-tempered, not quick to anger, exercising self-control, not being provoked all the time. It describes someone with the capacity to endure, maybe injustice, refusing to react and be controlled by others. There's the image here of putting aside my rights for the good of others, for the long-term good. Love is kind. It's a very big biblical theme in the New Testament. God is often described as somebody who is kind. The kindness of God is a theme, Old Testament to New Testament. It's a very beautiful theme. The kindness of God. God is compassionate and gracious. He's abounding in love, slow to anger, maintaining love to thousands. And this is back in Deuteronomy and Exodus. This is the kindness of God to Israel, even in their rebellion. In Hosea, God is the kindness of the betrayed lover who pursues his unfaithful wife. In Romans, Christ dying for us is an act of kindness intended to lead to repentance and restoration. And in Ephesians, it's out of his great love that God shows mercy and grace. Out of his kindness, he gives us future hope. So kindness is almost synonymous with love, patience and kindness. Let's look at a couple more positives. Love rejoices with the truth. So this sits in contrast to love doesn't delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. And again, we see here that these verses are not just nice sentimentalism. It isn't just nice language. This is tough love. This is tough stuff. It's very easy in business, in life, in our own lives, in church life, not to rejoice with the truth. As I was researching and writing this chapter, there were two things that were going on at the time, I think. One was a report into the Church of England and how the Church of England had investigated abuse within the church over many years. And basically, the independent report said that the church had basically hidden the truth. It had done investigations, but it didn't want the whole truth to come out, and it had done that to protect the institution. We can think of the same thing that's happened in churches here in Ireland. Also going on at the time, of course, it was Bill Hybels and all the things that happened in Willow Creek Church. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But there were accusations made by several women of very good character against Hybels. And they were squashed, they were not listened to, they were rejected, they were vilified, they were excluded. And it was only over years when the leadership of that church eventually was forced to deal with the truth. And even then, when they tried to deal with it, they didn't do it well. And even now, I don't think it's really been dealt with very clearly. There's a great temptation in life not to rejoice with the truth. We have too much to lose. We don't want the truth to come out. Maybe we can even pretend, oh, well, maybe it's in the benefit of the gospel that the truth doesn't come out and the church will be harmed. Paul will have none of that. We are to be people who rejoice with the truth, who tell the truth. As Christians, we have to be truthful about ourselves and to God and to one another. So it isn't about public relations. Love isn't interested in sort of manipulating public relations and doing PR and twisting the truth and putting a spin on things. We're to be truth tellers. And that's a very searching, challenging aspect of love. So those are some of the positives. It rejoices with the truth. These are challenging things. Let's quickly look at some of the unloves here. There are 8 negatives within what he says. These choices that we make, which is the way of love, which is the way of unlove. And so when we come to the way of unlove, let's look at that. He talks about jealousy and envy. He talks about love does not envy. And there's a sense of being filled with jealousy or enviness of somebody else, of wanting to be somebody else. And Paul is, of course, you'll have done this earlier, there's jealousy and quarreling among them in Corinthians. They are divided, they're following different leaders, they're sort of full of competition between one another. The church is not to be a place of competition and envy and jealousy. Because when we do that, we damage the whole body. It's like having a broken finger and the other finger's looking at the broken finger and celebrating its brokenness. It's self-destructive. We end up harming ourselves. We end up harming the body. And of course, Paul's picture of the body is a very powerful one in Corinthians. He says then also love doesn't boast. And there's a sense of envy, boasting. It's all about the self. It's about my position, how others think of me. Boasting is self-promotion, trying to impress others, wanting to be seen as number one, wanting to be others to think we're the best. And it seeks the admiration for the self, but it's not primarily concerned for the good of others. It's an inward turn. And this is the opposite of what love is, which is living a life for the blessing and good of other people. And again, I've mentioned social media. I'm not against social media, but we live in a world, a very narcissistic age, where we're told to promote ourselves all the time in business and in work. Often we're called to be self-promoters, to get on and get there. But we have to be careful of that within the community of the church. It is not a place of competition, promotion, and trying to do others down to get ahead. Then there's the word proud, to be inflate, and that's sort of linked to being, he says elsewhere, don't be puffed up, don't be arrogant. And I guess, I don't know, I'm sure, I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure we can think of arrogant people that we've met. And there's a sense with an arrogance that really I have nothing to learn from anybody else. I know it all. I've already got the answers. And certainly I've found as a teacher, if a student has a sort of aspect of arrogance, you become unteachable. You're not actually ready to learn because you think you know all the answers already. So very much tied to love is a sense of humility, a sense of, I don't know it all. I need to learn and grow and develop. I don't have all the answers. Love doesn't dishonor others. And maybe the Corinthians were acting in ways which they thought their freedom gave them liberty to act in any way they wanted because they were so wise and smart and they had this knowledge and gifts. And yet they were almost celebrating then, back in chapter 5, isn't it? They were celebrating sexual immorality and incest even. They were almost saying this is a sign of our maturity and our wisdom. We have this great freedom to do whatever we want. Of course, doesn't that very much tie into our contemporary culture? It says to us, you are free. We can be whoever we want. We can do whatever we want. Express yourself. Be free to be yourself. I guess within the law is generally where our culture is. But a Christian aspect of love says, well, no, that's not a Christian attitude to freedom. Actually, our freedom is to be used to bless others, not about the self. It's not about just me having the right to do whatever I want. Actually, we're to use our freedom. How do we serve the church? How do we serve the body? How do we serve other people? And doesn't this bring to mind the words of Jesus? It is in losing our lives that we find them. There's a paradox of Christian love here. It's in self-giving that we find true life and true flourishing. And the more we seek the way of unlove here, the more we seek self-promotion, pride, envy, competition, the more we lose ourselves, the more we lose life, and we get lost in bitterness and envy and pride and arrogance. Very, very quickly, I'll mention the other couple here. Love is not easily angered. It's the opposite of patience. There's a rush to judgment. We think the worst of others rather than the best. Love keeps no record of wrongs. It isn't holding grudges. I'm very good at holding grudges. I freely admit that. I can easily remember things that people have done I think wrong to me, and I can remember them and recall them. I have to work at that within my own life, to let that go, to not hold grudges, to think the best of people and to bless them. So Paul is really giving the Corinthians a tremendous choice here, an insight into their own lives. He's saying, here's what's going on in your church. And really the way of unlove, sadly, has described too much of their community. That doesn't describe all of their community. He has great things to say about them. But he's giving them a vision here. This is the way of Jesus. This is the way of the Christian faith, is to follow that path of love. And in doing so, you will not follow the path of unlove. And therefore, we will be a community which is formed by the Spirit to be a community of love and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and all the fruit of the Spirit that he talks about elsewhere. So really what Paul is saying, love doesn't delight in evil, it rejoices in the truth. And Paul's defense against division and conflict, grudges, hatred, bitterness, division, all things that can tear churches apart, his defense against that isn't rules. It isn't regulations. It's the way of love, which is imitating who God is as a God of love. Now that's unpacking some of the text. I haven't got to the end. Let's look at just the last few verses. I want to make a couple of points about verses 8 to 13 because they're very interesting. And he says there, he gives a vision of this picture of love, which is looking forward to the future. And it's saying, well, let's look at what it says. The Corinthians were all tied up with tongues, with gifts, with wisdom and knowledge, and using their bodies in whatever way they felt appropriate within their culture. And Paul is saying, actually, try and have a bigger picture. It's not all about the now. It's not about the here and now. As Christians, we are called on a journey within this world which is looking towards the future. And he gives them a future image here of love. So love isn't only a good thing here. He gives them a bigger framework to think about love. And what he's saying here is love is actually the most important thing. Why? It's even greater than faith and hope that he talks about. Love is the most important thing because love will characterize the kingdom to come. It will characterize the future world when God becomes all in all, when the kingdom comes, when the new creation comes. Love here in the present, as we love one another, as we follow the example of Jesus, love is a foretaste of the world to come. So let's look at what he's saying in these verses. And this is what he means by when we look through a mirror, we only see a partial reflection. We see through the glass darkly. Love here in the present is a foretaste, a picture, an image of what is going to come. And so this is what he means by this image of when I was a child, I'm going to put these childish things away. When I'm grown up, I'll see God face to face. And these are all images of the present and the future. And so what he's saying is love is the greatest. Love is so important. Love is central because love is God's agenda for his people. That's going to be characterizing the kingdom to come, and love characterizes God himself. So if these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. And I think that's an amazing image. It gives us such a picture, a theological reason for understanding why love is so important. And it also gives us a very tangible, practical description of what love looks like within the church. And so I think this ties personally to where we are. We have to ask ourselves, this searing searchlight of love, what does it say into our lives as we read this text? Are there particular relationships that we need to think about? Are there actions that we need to take? What is God saying to us? And also as a church, this is a fantastic vision of the Christian life and what church is all about and why we're here. We are called to be communities of love who love God and one another. And as Jesus says, this is the whole purpose and fulfillment of the law. Thank you. God bless.
Over the mountains and the sea, your river runs with love for me. And I will open up my heart and let the healer set me free. I'm happy to be in the truth, and
So was that a wonderful song? First of all, thank you. Thank you
Sorry.
so much for teaching us this morning. And that's a wonderful song, I Can Sing of Your Love Forever. And now Dave Adams has recorded our prayer for us. And just to say that he recorded this while he was walking up the side of a hill. And the first part, the first video is just a kind of a thought, which is self-explanatory. And then there's a second video, which is a prayer. So enjoy this.
So I was talking to someone during the week, and as you do, I asked them how are they doing, and they said, I'm putting one foot in front of the other. And doesn't it just seem a little bit like that at the moment? That all we're really able to do is put one foot in front of the other. And that can get hard sometimes. As the road gets steeper, we put one foot in front of the other. I was looking at a passage in Exodus this week where basically one state, the state of Egypt, had its knee on another state, on a group of people who they'd put into slavery. A group of people who had to put one foot in front of the other 7 days a week. They had no choice but to put one foot in front of the other 7 days a week. Eventually this group of people made an exodus. They got out from under the grip of the superstate that was Egypt, and they had a choice to make. And one of the choices they made was not to put one foot in front of the other 7 days a week, but to put one day in 7 aside to stop and think. Stop and raise their heads and have a look around and have a look at the bigger picture. I'd encourage you in this time of necessity where we have to put one foot in front of the other, climbing up hills, to put aside a time to look up and ask a bigger question, to look to your God, ask for His help, ask for His space, ask for His peace, to stop and look. When I normally do this walk, my wife goes, right, we're stopping here. Might be because she's tired, but it could be that she's figured things out, that we need to stop and lift our heads and look up. So Dougie asked me, would I add a short prayer to my previous video, and I said no problem, I'll go for a wee walk tonight and I'll try and add something to it. And as you can see, weather conditions are slightly different to the last time. Still as beautiful as ever, but maybe we need to sort of go for a short walk to try and get out of the wind. On our last video we were thinking a little bit about Shabbat, and one of the things that we need to do was stop. And I had a little bit more of a read and came up with another 2 elements of Shabbat that I think might be important for us to think about. That might even be something that we can base our prayers on. Now I'm just getting out of the horrible rain and into the forest. First of those is the fact that we need to remember. Part of Shabbat is remembering. In the Old Testament, people looked back to creation and to the story of the Exodus. But they also looked forward. They also looked forward to the Messianic age. So maybe we could just stop, which we know we have to do, and remember. Think back to maybe a time when you were close to God. Maybe a time when you met Him for the first time, when it started to make sense. And also just to stop and think forward. To think that it's not just about putting one foot in front of the other, but that there is a purpose to life. That there is a messianic purpose. That at some point the tears will end. At some point everything will be perfect. And that's something that we can look forward to. So maybe you can just press the hold button, shut me up for a few minutes, think about that, and then come back and we'll talk a bit more. Okay, so you're back again? Good. believe it or not, I looked up something today on the computer, and it was just a greeting that people might share on the Sabbath. And it was these words: Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. And I thought, that's something I'm never going to hear in conversation. And someone across the office, while on a telephone conversation, actually used those words this afternoon. So I said, maybe that's something we need to think about. We need to think about peace, God's peace. So let's just pray for that. Let's just pray for that in our own lives. Lord, I just pray that you would put your peace in our hearts, that you would give us that Sabbath rest, that we might rest in you and know your peace. May the peace of God guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And as we think about the concept of peace, of shalom, bigger than peace, much bigger than peace, go look it up, and maybe you'll be able to read a little bit more about that. Maybe we just think about the Holy Lands at this time, and we pray that they might know something of shalom, that they might know peace, that the thing that might stop might be war, that there may be peace in those lands. And we pray for the nation of Israel, we pray for the people of Gaza, we pray that there might be a cessation of violence, at some sort of solution and some form of peace. I'm going to say goodbye now and head back down the mountain. I'll shout out to you as well. Anyone needs to go for a walk up here, I'm getting my second jab soon. If anyone needs a tour of the Three Rock Mountains, just let me know. I'd love to have a chat and go for a walk and maybe share something of God with you and maybe you with me. Shalom.
So I hope you enjoyed that prayer. And so thank you to you, my friend, for coming today and for speaking to us. Thanks for Ross doing the whole series earlier, and for Kezia. And also, this is the last Sunday where Ben Shanahan has been working with us and collecting our videoing for us and editing and so on. And so I want to thank him most sincerely on behalf of the church for all his really hard work over the last 2 years, nearly 2 years, and for all that he's done, and for being so amenable when, as the book of Esther says, that bit where she says, Mordecai says to her, well, maybe you're here for just a time as this, and we really felt that was the case with Ben, that he was here for such a time as this. So thank you, my young friend, and may the Lord bless you and look after you as you head off into the new world without us. And so listen, thanks very much everybody for being online with us this morning, and we'll see you again next week.